Hey everyone, today we're working on LeetCode Challenge 1399 called Count Largest Group. In this challenge we're given an integer n. Each number from 1 to n is grouped according to the sum of its digits. And we need to return the number of groups that have the largest size. So let's look at one of the examples to break down what they're asking for here. So if we're given the number 13, the first thing we want to do is look at all of the numbers from 1 to 13 and find the sum of the digits. So that's straightforward for 1 through 9. That's just going to be single digit 1 through 9. As we get above 9, obviously you have to add up all the digits to find the sum. And then what we want to do is we want to look at all those sums and create groups of which numbers have matching sums when you sum up all their digits. So for example, 1 and 10 go into the same group because when you sum up those digits, they both equal 1. 2 and 11 go into the same group because the sum of their digits both equals 2, and so on and so forth. So for this example, if we're given the number 13, when we go through and we find the groups of all of the sums that are alike, we end up with 9 total groups. And then what we want to do is we want to find how many of those groups have the largest size. So in this case, out of the 9 total groups that we have here, the largest size of any of them is 2, and 4 of those have the largest size. So it's a little bit confusing to think through exactly what they're asking for there. We want to make sure what we're eventually finding is the number of groups that have that largest size. So let's go one step at a time here, getting into the code. The first thing I want to do is create an object that's going to keep track of things as we iterate through all of these numbers and find the sums. Then I'm going to set up my iteration. Let I equal 1 is where we're supposed to start. I less than or equal to n, I plus plus. And then what we need to start with is finding the sums. So I'm going to create a sum variable. And in order to find the sum of the digits, we're going to split the number. We're going to convert it to a number and then split it into an array so that we can call the dot reduce method to get the sum. Pass in the accumulator and the current value, and we need to remember as we do the summing that we initially converted all these values to strings. So this is going to be number of the current value, and we want that to start at 0. So that should be giving us the sum of the digits. Just to check as we go and make sure that that is all working correctly, let's console log the sums. And it looks like that's working correctly. We're getting the sum of the digits for all of the numbers from 1 to 13. So next what we want to do is we want to find all of our groups. So we're going to compare these sums and we're going to store the count of how many times we see that sum in our groups object right here. So trying to remember the shorthand syntax for this. There's a way to do this pretty simply in one line. Groups at sum is equal to groups at sum or 0 plus 1. So that's a nice little shorthand rather than having to set up a whole if statement that searches the object for if this sum already exists and then adding to it, or if it doesn't exist, creating it and setting it equal to 1. This is a nice little shorthand. What this tells us is right here, if this exists, it'll ignore the 0 and it'll simply add 1 to the value. If it doesn't exist, then it will start with 0 plus 1. So that's a nice shorthand to keep track of the count of how many times we see that sum and do that all in one line. So again, I'd just like to double check things along the way, make sure everything's working correctly. We're going to console log our groups object, and we see that with each iteration it's adding to it. And we'll go all the way down to the bottom to the final iteration. So when the sum is 1, we have a count of 2. When the sum is 2, we have a count of 2, and so on and so forth. Looks like this is matching what we see over here in the example, so that's good. Looks like things are working correctly here. All right, so now what we need to do is look through our groups object and find out what our largest size is. So we want to essentially find the maximum of any of these values within the object. So I'm going to say largest size is equal to math.max, and then I can use the spread operator object.values of groups. And I think that should give us the correct size. What we're looking for is 2. And that works. It's giving us 2. All right, and finally what we need to do is find how many of the groups in this group object have the value that's equal to the largest size. So I'm going to do, how do we want to do this? Let's go object.values groups. So that's going to find all our values. Okay, just filter. Yeah, let's do dot filter. And then the size, we'll pass that in. Size is equal to largest size. So this will give us an array with the values from the groups where the size is equal to the largest size, and then I can simply return the length of the array. That will tell us how many of these groups have that largest size. So let's run this. Let's see if that's passing the test cases. Looks like not yet. Oh, I just forgot to return it. There we go. Add the return. Yeah, so it looks like we're passing the test cases. Let's submit and make sure that everything works. Yeah, it looks pretty good there. Maybe there's a way to optimize a little better for space complexity over here, but that does get us to the solution. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. A little confusing to describe how to get to exactly what they're asking for in this question, but feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help answer.